Before we dive into today's eerie adventure, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of our haunting stories. Welcome back to Past the Pumpkin's Glow. Let's dive right into our stories tonight. It was during a small weekend tour with my high school band that we decided to crash at our guitarist's house, a typical home with a sprawling basement where we all slept. The basement, while spacious, didn't have a bathroom, so any nighttime trips required a trek upstairs. I'm a heavy sleeper, and it usually takes a lot to wake me up, but that night, a pressing need dragged me from a deep sleep. In a groggy state, I navigated the dark staircase, relying on dim light filtering from the upstairs to guide my steps. At the top of the stairs, I turned right, facing the door leading to the main living area. The moonlight spilled across the hall from the bathroom, illuminating my path with a pale silver glow. After using the bathroom and still half asleep, I opened the door to head back downstairs. That's when I saw it. The door to the basement, which I was sure I had left open, was now eerily ajar. As I stared, trying to collect my drowsy thoughts, I noticed something even more unsettling. A set of long, thin fingers silently reaching under the door. I stood there with my mouth open and I couldn't say a word, but I thought, what the hell? Then it dawned on me. It must have been one of my friends playing a trick on me. "No, you butt wipe, you almost had me," I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet house. The fingers quickly withdrew under the door, and with a mix of relief and residual nerves, I opened it, expecting to catch one of my friends on the other side. But there was nothing, no one. Just an empty, silent landing. Flipping on the basement lights, I called down. "Were any of you guys just at the top of the stairs messing with me?" From below, in the dim glow, came a few groans and this sleepy response. "Dude, we've been down here sleeping the whole time. Shh, you're gonna wake my parents up, dude." The air felt cooler as I stood there, the weight of the silence pressing around me. Everyone was exactly where I'd left them, sprawled in their sleeping bags. No one could have darted back down that fast without making a sound. I turned off the lights and tried to settle back into my spot, but sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. Every small noise seemed sinister, every shadow a potential hiding spot for whatever those fingers had belonged to. By dawn, with the house gradually stirring into light, I was the first to leave. The image of those cold, reaching fingers burned into my memory. A creepy reminder of a night that had started as just another band hangout. After months of juggling work calls with the daily chaos of family life, I decided to convert a newly finished bedroom in our basement into a dedicated office. It was the perfect sanctuary, where the noise of footsteps and laughter above was just a distant echo, allowing me the isolation I needed to focus. Initially, the peace was palpable and welcomed, allowing for productivity and concentration. However, it wasn't long before odd occurrences began to disrupt the calm. It started with soft, almost imperceptible knocks. At first, I dismissed them as the house settling or perhaps the echo of distant doors closing. But as time passed, these knocks grew louder and more frequent, always seeming to emanate from the office door that led back to the main area of the basement. Every time it happened, I would pause, my heart racing, and stare at the door, half expecting someone to enter. But each time I opened it, the basement beyond was empty, filled only with the cool, musty air of disuse. The knocking became a disturbingly regular occurrence, always happening when I was most engrossed in my work. I tried to rationalize it, even mentioning it to my family. They offered logical explanations, attributing the noise to the quirks of our old house. No one else heard it, they insisted. Driven by a mix of determination and creeping dread, I set up a camera in the basement to capture whatever, or whoever, was responsible. Each day, I reviewed the footage, fast-forwarding through hours of still, silent video. There was never any indication of movement, no shadows or disturbances, nothing that could explain the eerie knocking. One evening, just as I was about to shut down my computer, the knocking started again. This time more aggressive, almost violent. It echoed through the basement, sending shivers down my spine. I stood up, my chair toppling over with a crash, and approached the door slowly. The banging continued, a harsh metallic pounding now accompanied by a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the wood. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I flung the door open. The main area of the basement was revealed in the dim light, utterly normal and still. There was nothing there, no sign of disturbance, just the same old basement. My eyes darted to the camera's blinking red light. It too had captured nothing. That night I asked my wife and kids again if they had ever heard the pounding. They confirmed they hadn't heard anything unusual. The realization that only I could hear the knocking was unsettling. Since that unsettling day, I have not set foot back in the basement. The office sits just as I left it, untouched and gradually accumulating dust, standing as a quiet testament to those strange events. Yet, occasionally, in the quiet moments when the house seems most still, I can faintly hear the echo of knocking from below, serving as a haunting reminder of the unseen presence that seemed to beckon from the other side of that door. Dare to share your own spooky experiences in the comments below. Who knows, your story might just be our next creepy highlight. When my family first moved to the old town, I was the typical 17-year-old skeptical about leaving behind city life for the quiet, almost too quiet, streets of what seemed like a forgotten place. Our neighbor, Mr. Harrow, was one of the first to welcome us. Retired school teacher with a penchant for gardening and stories as colorful as his flower beds. One Saturday, while I was mowing the lawn, Mr. Harrow invited me over for an iced tea and offered a tour of his house. Known in the neighborhood for its eccentric interior and a basement filled with what he described as priceless memories from days gone by. Curiosity outweighed my initial reluctance. I had heard from local kids at school about Mr. Harrow's collection of antiques and oddities, and part of me was intrigued. Walking into Mr. Harrow's home felt like stepping into another era. The walls were lined with vintage photographs and old maps, and the air carried the musty scent of paper and wood. He led me to the basement, which was surprisingly well kept, with rows of shelves housing everything from old radios to foreign coins and military medals. As we delved deeper into his collection, Mr. Harrow seemed to grow more animated, detailing the origins of each piece with a historian's precision. The basement extended further than I had expected, and at the end of a long corridor, he paused before a large steel door that looked oddly out of place amidst the antiques. "This," he said, turning to me with a slightly too eager smile, "is where I keep more of my sensitive items. Not many get to see it, but I think you'll appreciate what's inside." He unlocked the door, revealing a room that was more of a bunker than part of a house. It was dimly lit, with items that looked more modern, less like antiques. Something about the atmosphere felt off, claustrophobic and overly secluded. As he ushered me inside, a sudden unease washed over me. The door shut with a heavy thud, and I realized there was no handle on the inside. Anxiety gripped me, and the walls seeming to close in. Mr. Harrow's voice became distant as I scanned the room for another exit. "There's something special I want you to see," he continued, oblivious to my discomfort. But my focus was on finding a way out. I politely declined, citing a made-up reminder about an errand I had forgotten. Mr. Harrow seemed disappointed, but unlocked the door and let me out. I excused myself quickly, my heart racing until I reached the safety of my own home. After that day, I told my parents about the experience in detail. Concerned for my safety and curious about the bizarre circumstances, they contacted the local police to report the incident. The police opened an investigation and discovered troubling details about Mr. Harrow. He had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which had caused significant deterioration in his cognitive functions. This condition often made him revert to his behaviors and memories from long ago, some of which were deeply troubling. In their search of Mr. Harrow's basement, the police found homemade pillow shams and pieces of clothing made from fabrics identified in missing children's reports from decades ago. The discovery unraveled a darker side of Mr. Harrow's past that no one had suspected. As the investigation continued, the community struggled to reconcile the charming, elderly neighbor they thought they knew with the emerging evidence of his possible involvement in long-forgotten crimes. This incident left me wary of the unknowns hidden behind closed doors and the secrets that seemingly mundane places can hold. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the surface only tells part of the story, and what lies beneath can be far more complex and disturbing. Hi everyone, I'm Jake. I don't usually post stuff like this, but I need to get it off my chest. My wife, Lisa, and I recently bought a house built in the 1950s. It's got that classic charm, but the basement is a different story. The first time I went down there, I noticed an old toy box tucked in the corner. It was one of those wooden ones with a faded circus theme painted on it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a single battered clown doll. I know, right? Creepy as hell. I figured it was just some forgotten relic, but when I picked it up, I felt a strange chill. The doll's eyes, glassy and vacant, seemed to follow me as I moved around the basement. That night, strange things started happening. We'd hear footsteps coming from the basement, even though no one was down there. Doors would creak open on their own, and lights flickered. Lisa thought it was just the house settling, but I knew better. There was something deeply unsettling about that clown doll. One evening, I went down to check the fuse box because the power had gone out. As I descended the stairs, I noticed the clown doll was no longer in the toy box. Instead, it was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me with its lifeless eyes. My heart pounded, but I convinced myself someone must have moved it. I put the doll back in the box and went back upstairs, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. But things got worse. Lisa started having nightmares about the doll, saying it was trying to choke her. She would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, and when I asked her what happened, she would just shake her head and say, "It was the doll." I found her one night in the basement, standing in front of the toy box, her eyes glazed over as if in a trance. When I shook her, she snapped out of it, but had no memory of how she got there. I decided to get rid of the doll. I took it out to the backyard and burned it. Lisa watched with me, and we both felt a sense of unease. The flames consumed the doll, leaving behind only ashes. I thought that would be the end of it. For a while, things seemed to go back to normal. The house was quiet, and Lisa's nightmares stopped. But then, last night, I heard laughter coming from the basement. It was faint, but unmistakable. I went down, flashlight in hand, and there, sitting on the toy box, was the clown doll, completely unscathed, with that same vacant stare. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the doll and threw it into the trash can outside. I made sure the lid was securely fastened, then went back inside, hoping that would be the end of it. But the laughter continued, growing louder and more mocking each night. One evening, as we were eating dinner, the kitchen cabinet suddenly flung open, and dishes came crashing to the floor. We stood there in shock, not knowing what to do. The doors throughout the house began to open and close on their own, slamming shut with such force that the entire house seemed to shake. Desperate, I decided to do some research on the house's history. I found out that the previous owner, a man named Mr. Carson, had a young son who died tragically in the basement. According to the records, the boy had fallen down the stairs and broken his neck. His favorite toy? A clown doll. Determined to put an end to this, I contacted a local paranormal expert, Dr. Emily Harris. She agreed to come over and investigate. When she arrived, she immediately sensed a dark presence in the house. She performed a cleansing ritual, using candles, incense, and salt. As we chanted, the air grew colder, and the lights flickered ominously. Suddenly, the kitchen cabinets flung open again, and the doors began to slam shut repeatedly. Dr. Harris continued chanting, her voice strong and unwavering. The atmosphere grew more intense, but eventually the activity began to subside. The doors stopped slamming and the air grew warmer. Dr. Harris picked up the doll and placed it in a metal box lined with more salt and protective symbols. "This should keep it contained," she said. "I'll take it to a secure location where it can do no more harm." Lisa and I thanked her profusely, relieved that the nightmare was finally over. For the first time in months, we slept peacefully that night. The house felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Life slowly returned to normal. The basement no longer held any fear for us, and Lisa's nightmares ceased entirely. We never heard from Dr. Harris again, but we hoped she managed to keep the malevolent spirit contained. Every now and then, I still think about that clown doll and the boy's tragic story. It serves as a reminder that some things are best left undisturbed, and that the past can sometimes reach out and touch the present in ways we can never fully understand. Thanks for tuning in to Past the Pumpkin's Glow. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you won't miss any of our chilling tales. Drop us a comment below. We're dying to hear from you.